No? All right, well, let's open with a word of prayer then. Heavenly Father, we come to you this Sabbath day, thankful for your blessings, thankful for the good Sabbath we've had with good music and the baptism and lots of good stuff, Lord. And I just pray that your Spirit would continue to be with us as we have this meeting, continue to move us, direct us, guide us, Lord, because we are here to discuss your church here in Tracy. We're here to discuss the gospel work that you have entrusted us. So we are asking for your guidance and for your direction. And these things we ask in Christ's name. Amen. All right, well, welcome to everyone here in person and those on Zoom. And I think Mike might be starting our streaming service as well. So however you're joining us, we're glad that you're here. If you are watching on YouTube or perhaps on Facebook, we aren't going to be able to check. You probably won't be able to give any real-time feedback. But if you're on Zoom, you'll be able to ask questions, provide some feedback, and hopefully appropriate feedback. So, and for those of us here in person, of course, we're going to have a mic to be passed around. So hopefully you can wait for that mic to help with the sound. We might not need it here in person, but the people watching online will need that help to be able to hear what we are saying. How it's going to happen is I'm going to kind of give the introduction, set the table, so to speak, and then Leo is going to come and help guide the discussion. I'll be taking notes because as we talked about in November, we kind of set out things that how our church was, and how our community is doing. And so we gave us about a month and a half to process some of the challenges. And now is the brainstorming session. Now is the time to talk. Now is the time to share. When Leo comes up and asks these discussion questions, the general principle is there's no bad answer, right? Because we're brainstorming, and so don't think that you have to sit there and come up with the perfect answer before you raise your hand or before you want to share. So yeah, keep that in mind. You might not want to share. Well, I think building a spaceship is the answer because that's not going to be realistic. But this is the brainstorming session. So feel free to share, and when we get to the section or questions that you have something to say, that you have some ideas, or if you have some clarifying questions, please feel free to ask. Again, we'll have a mic going around. I'll be taking notes because, again, this is not just time for us to speak words into the air and watch them disappear. We want to actually come up with some good ideas to put into practice. And so we're hoping that, again, as we've prayed for the Holy Spirit to guide us, this is what we are hoping that transpires today, that we will get some good direction to move forward as a church. Hence the name of this meeting, Moving Forward. As a recap, this process actually began in 2019, December 2019. We had the 2020 visioning session. None of us visioned a worldwide pandemic, so that obviously created a problem. But we kind of kept those notes, and in the elders and somewhat in the board meeting, we've been discussing some of that along the way. But we've wanted to re-engage here in October, starting in October, kind of what we were starting to discuss in December. We know that our church is facing challenges. That was pre-COVID. And COVID, and I think around the world, has, generally speaking, elevated the challenges that were already existing, kind of heightened the stakes, so to speak. And so here we find ourselves at the end of 2021, which is kind of hard to say. 2022 is just a few weeks away, and we are still trying to process, where we were before pandemic, what the pandemic has done to us as a church family. We talked about in October how we've lost a lot of important people to our church family. Through moving away, we think of the Lanzas, the Colemans, the Byerlys. There was about, I think, 16 people that, between moving away, facing ongoing health challenges like Yvonne Miller, Kathy Igarashi, and then some that have passed away. We think of Judy Mercer. And so there's been a lot of change, difficult change in this past year and a half or so. But we are still here as a church family. We aren't planning, we're still here to carry out the gospel work in Tracy. And so we need to adapt to these challenges. We need to adapt to what we are facing as a church family moving forward. In October, I shared that our engagement was down in terms of church attendance in person, a little bit down in church engagement online of our live stream services. Also in terms of giving, our church budget was in a pretty large deficit. It was about $17,000 behind as of October. Thankfully, that has turned around. There have been some generous donations that have pretty much erased that gap of our church budget deficit, so we aren't facing a big financial crisis. And as I mentioned in October, we do have savings in the bank, so that is somewhat of a comfort. But the good news is our finances have, by and large, turned around with some generous donations. I have noticed that there have been more people attending in person. Our online engagement views have stayed about the same, but it does seem there have been a few more people attending Sabbath school online, as well as a few more people coming in person. So there does seem to be, in the past couple of months, some more re-engagement. There's not a lot more, we haven't turned 180 degrees, but we see some improvements. We see some, the trend is going in the right direction. That doesn't mean that that's going to stay that way. Who knows what the future has, right? No one saw the pandemic coming. No one saw, we've had to deal with the Delta variant, and it seems the Omicron variant is still a lot of uncertainty there. Plus whatever else. We saw, if you've been watching the news, the Midwest was battered by a pretty monstrous storm, a variety of tornadoes that have wreaked havoc. So we don't know what the future has, but we do know where we're at. We do know that we want to continue to bring the gospel in light of the three angels' messages to the community of Tracy. And so we are here to discuss these things, to plan, to brainstorm, and to move forward. Does that make sense? Are there any questions, any comments before we continue any further? All right. At the 2020 visioning meeting in 2019, we talked about a lot of what we would think are the major things that we would like to see in an ideal church. The top three that we focused on were commitment, service/outreach, and growth. And while I'm sure there's other things that we would like to see, these are the three main areas that we, as a church at that meeting, wanted to focus on. And so using that as our springboard, we're going to discuss these three areas where we're at here in 2021. And hopefully the end of the pandemic, we don't know, but at least it seems that we're at least hoping that there's light at the end of the tunnel here. And how does that impact things? How does that impact our commitment, our service and outreach, and our growth plans moving forward? So with that, I would like to invite Leo to come up and help lead in our discussion here.
Good afternoon, church, family. Just want to say first that these three things that we're going to kind of talk about together are things that are very important to any church before this pandemic. They were important during, and we're still in it. And they're going to be even more important as we go forward. So But today we're talking about them to kind of understand the situation with our church right now, and with all these questions that will come up and that we will all answer together. And so this is, I'm going to lead up here, but this is, we're all going to be able to share with how you feel or how our church is doing. But it's for us to be able to be a more committed church, a more serving church, and a growing church. And so these things will all help us in the future. So I wanted to bring up the fact on the first question says, what does commitment look like in 2021? So I want to ask you, if you were somebody who was very committed to what you were doing in this church, how did this pandemic affect your commitment to the church? And just raise your hand. Pastor has a microphone.
When the COVID started and we were having all our sermons online, the pastor was doing a sermon from his home and moved to the church and so on and so forth. At first I thought, well, why go to church? I can just stay home. Why not just watch it on TV? And then I guess the Holy Spirit touched my heart, and I made a commitment to myself to come to church every Sabbath. And I've been here every Sabbath since I made that commitment. And I think it was easy for people to stay home in their pajamas or relaxed or whatever and just watch the service on TV. And I think that is probably still happening to some.
And I want to interject here that is a very good point. That there is a commitment about coming to church. When you think of the concept of Christian disciplines or of spiritual disciplines, we kind of think of prayer or meditation or fasting or things like that. But church attendance is a discipline, because it takes discipline to come to church on a regular basis. With that said, I also understand that there is a balance, that for some people, Sabbath mornings are crazy, right? Especially when you have kids, you're trying to get everyone ready and out the door, and someone's missing a shoe and all of that, and all of a sudden Sabbath isn't a day of rest anymore. And we know very clearly that Sabbath was intended to be a day of rest. It was intended to be a blessing. And so I know that many people that have been engaging through online viewership, they have said that they have recaptured a sense of Sabbath rest that they haven't had for years and years and years. And so as a pastor, I understand that there's this tension. As Christians, we navigate tension, right? There's a tension of the real world, the secular world that we live in, as well as the kingdom of God that we are citizens of. And so that creates a tension in so many aspects of life. And yet, so I know there's this tension because there is a spiritual discipline of coming to church. There is a real, genuine, tangible benefit of coming to church with people, with building that community, learning people's names, being able to support them and receiving their support. But there's also that tension of being able to relax on the Sabbath and simply watch a service from the comfort of your living room. And so I think that's going to be a tension moving forward. I would hope that no one chooses just to stream services 100% of the time, because then you miss out on that discipline. You miss out on the benefit of coming and engaging with people and building that community. I know many of us, when we know that one of our church members is in need, we'll go and help. When we know that, someone needs, help with food, we'll be able to come and provide food for them. The internet doesn't provide food when we're in need, right? That comes from community. And so there is this tension. So I want to commend your commitment Sue, for coming. And I want to encourage people that are streaming that while it's good, and it definitely has its place, and I hope that it provides a rest and a benefit, that's not all that it should be either. Though we understand, and we like to encourage the rest that comes from engaging in that way. But moving forward, we live in a hybrid future, in a hybrid present now, and it's going to be a hybrid future. But we need to find a good balance for commitment, for community, for engagement, and for rest as well. Sylvia, did I see your hand?
I found, kind of like some of the rest, that when you were doing church from your living room, I just kind of chilled out. I mean, I always watched it, but as the worship coordinator, I didn't have to do anything anymore. And I just kind of laid back and hoped it would happen. Now that we're actually doing service in person and I'm actually here, I find that I'm re-engaging, because to help the service go on, there's a lot of people involved, and that it's a benefit. That's a blessing to do something together and have it turn out well, worshiping God like today. Whoa, we had the organ going, and it's just very different than just chilling back, but there's a blessing there, and we're called to come together to worship. And corporate worship, which is a thing of mine, that means all of us together. You kind of have to be together.
One thing that I wanted to share was when all this started, the first Sabbaths that you stayed home for us, physically, you stay home, and it is more relaxing. If you're just thinking about it, you had a long week, you get sleep, you sleep in, and you're there, but there's a point where you start to miss people, and I think that's the part that you can't. You have to almost see someone in person to express, and that's what happened with me personally. I felt fine physically because I had just worked a long week, and I felt fine sleeping in and getting up at 10, and even if I didn't wake up at 10, but I just stayed, kind of lounged around the house until 10, and then after a week or two, you start to think, when I think what happens is that when you're sick and you don't come to church, there's a reason for it. But when this happened, it was kind of different. You felt like, why am I here? And so people reacted different to it. But for me, it was, I really did miss seeing the people here. So Richard first.
I don't speak up very often, but I wanted to say that, it hasn't been that long since children of a certain age have been eligible for the vaccine. Now, in our household, we're just getting to that threshold where, we're crossing over the mark where, the vaccine should have taken effect, and our plan was to start, coming back soon thereafter. Now, I'm not sure what's going to happen with the new variant of COVID, but, we were planning to start coming back and attending. So, and I do understand what people are saying about, if you're at home watching, it's much more relaxing. But I want to let you know that, every Sabbath, when it gets time for church, my wife makes an announcement over the Alexa thing, and, we all gather downstairs and we turn the TV on and we do watch it.
And yeah, it's not, watching from, on the live stream isn't just about comfort. It does help with people that can't come to church, whether they're, are just a temporary illness, or they're having, they're a shut-in, or, like you said, children haven't been able to have the freedom that vaccines have provided for a while. So there's, it's not just, I want to be lazy or I want to come to church, right? That's not the only two options. There's a wide variety of spectrum of there, but But yeah, this is what we're talking about. What does commitment look like in our present circumstances? And we had to take a lot of these other factors into consideration.
Yeah, and along with everybody else, it was very comfortable. And Diana and I used to get together and watch it on the screen and then pop afterwards. That was fun. But we did miss people, like Leo was saying, and after a while it was like we need to get back as soon as we can so that we can all be together again and as a team and worship. And one of my things too in the commitment this year was to get VBS back on track and Fall Festival, because I really feel like the pandemic has been Satan's playground. The kids haven't been coming to church. Some parents are very good about watching and some aren't, right? And new habits have been formed. And so a lot of the children have not had much, if any, church over the last year and a half. And so, we need to be planting seeds wherever we can and whenever we can. And bringing everybody together. It felt so good to have everybody help. And we had it outside, and it worked. And, did we have as many kids? No, but that wasn't the point. We prayed that God would send the kids that he wanted to come. And we did have a good group of kids, and they had a wonderful time, as far as we know. And that was, I think, what it looked like for me was we need to get kids back. We need to get us back, and work together.
Mitch.
Has anybody figured out how we can get the young people back in?
It's coming up.
Oh, it is. Thanks.
Yeah, that's definitely a topic we're going to be discussing in a minute or so, a few minutes.
Anybody else for commitment? I want to just taking on what Kim just said. So what will our commitment be post-pandemic? And like I mentioned earlier, we're not through this. It's not in the past yet. But one thing that we can take from this year, with VBS, when all those plans started, there was a lot of questions about whether you could even have it, how would it be, if it was going to, and then once it was going to be outdoors, people start, will it work outdoors? It's a lot of little things. But we can use VBS as a encouraging sign for how things will look this coming year in the future. So I feel very optimistic because of that. Because if we didn't have anything, then we would say, well, how are we going to start? But I think that through what happened through VBS, we can use that as encouragement to whatever programs we're going to start up again. If we're going to be able to have classes for the kids again, if we're going to be able to start some of the ministries like the homeless feeding and all that, we could use that as encouragement to that it might be different, but it can still be done. And we just have to be careful and follow all the guidelines that we have to, and be careful and do our responsibility. So I don't know if any of you have some, what will it look like post-pandemic? And I know it's not over yet, but anything you would like to share to help us in the future in this coming year? Bob?
Well, one thing I think we've all missed, and that's our campouts. And we've lost our leader in that regard. So we need to get a new leader, get more commitment to those kinds of things. It doesn't have to be, a whole weekend. We could have church in the park. We can get picnics and, do those kinds of things. So, yeah, that's one of the things I'd like to see us get back to.
Well, I have some quick and easy good news for that. Part of the nominating committee is we did find someone that is willing to take on being the point person for church campouts. As far as picnics and all of that, we can work on that, but we do have, so it looks like this 2022 we will be restarting church campout. So. Is it Bob? It's not Bob. I want to kind of piggyback on what Leo said in terms of what commitment is going to look like. I want to kind of piggyback on what Leo said in terms of what commitment is going to look like post-pandemic. It's going to look different, right? I mean, I think this is obvious. That might be stating the obvious, but the pandemic has changed us, has changed society in pretty fundamental ways. And so what commitment's going to look like, even though we aren't fully post-pandemic yet, it's going to look different than what it looked like before. And I think VBS is a good example. VBS, we had a VBS program, but VBS didn't look like it did before, right? And so moving forward, as we continue to brainstorm, the commitment component is going to look different. We might not have the weekly commitment that we've been used to or we feel that we need, but we might have to have a different understanding of what commitment is. Is it a biweekly commitment? Is it a monthly commitment? Is it, are people going to commit to something that looks different, or are they only going to commit to things that look like they did, pre-pandemic? But basically what we're saying here is that we have to be open to how commitment looks going forward. That doesn't mean everything's going to change, right? We can't have a Sabbath where no one's in the AV booth, right? I mean, we could, but it's probably not going to turn out too well. But those kinds of things, to be honest, I forget if we're going to look at this later, even though I'm the one that made the slides. But when Leo talked about the children's programming, we were having difficulty, even pre-pandemic, of finding leaders for the littlest, the cradle roll, the beginners classroom. And right now, so what does that mean moving forward? We don't currently have a cradle roll or a beginner's leader. Most of the other children's Sabbath school leaders have either moved on or retired, or they're not gearing up to retake those responsibilities. So what does that look like for our children's programs? We need to have a children's program, right? I think we all agree. And yet, if we look around, we don't have too many children. There's not a lot of children in our church. And we will be talking about young adults later, which Mitch brought up. But there's a connection there. You don't have young adults who are the generation that have kids, then we start to miss the kids, right? So these are all things that we need to process here. But yeah, things are going to have to look different post-pandemic, and this is why we're having this meeting, to try to figure out how it's going to look and the challenges we're facing.
Peter.
The pandemic and post-pandemic is in the middle. There's a very stretched out gray area. At least I cannot see how it won't be so sudden, because we keep on having variants after variants. We have all these fluid decisions that are being made time and time again. So I see a situation where we'll have a drawn-out gray area, and one of the challenges that I see is we've developed habits during pandemic that we're going to bring over to post-pandemic. So we'll have these same habits that will be drawn out in that gray area, and then they'll continue on in the post-pandemic. And so for there to be a difference in post-pandemic, we may have to modify or decide on our behaviors now. That's the only challenge that I see. So if for example, I get used to, I get into my own habits of, I get up in the morning and I know what I'm doing, for example, on Sabbath, due to the challenges that I'm having with the pandemic, and then that now becomes part of my lifestyle, which, there's nothing wrong with that, but it just now becomes my habit, and I continue on with that. So it will take a little bit longer for me to be able to break that and go back to where I was before.
Good points, Peter.
Rod?
I was just thinking about the children of Israel as they left Egypt and were going to the land of Canaan. They sent out 12 spies. 2 of them said, we need to trust God. 10 of them said, no, we can't do it on our own, and they were right. But had they pushed through, and this in a sense is the commitment part of it, is had they gone to the promised land, God would have opened up, just like he did the Red Sea or water in the desert, and they would have been blessed. So the kind of commitment that I see us doing is really committing to God for the future, and then trusting him where he leads us, and follow what he's doing. The other thing I was going to say about commitment, if you're there in person, if you're there, you get a reaction from everybody else. For instance, my daughter went to a 49ers game and she said, wow, it was so energetic with the crowd there. But if you're home and watch TV, you don't get that unless you're energetic. But if you're not real energetic and you're just watching the game, you don't get that. But when you're actually there, there is an aura about it. There is something when we're at church that God enters into it also, and the Holy Spirit. And it gives us that commitment and that energy, and we can go home really blessed. And that's not to say people who are watching can't also get a blessing, but you will get a greater blessing, I believe, when you're there and you're feeling the Spirit with others of God's church.
Thank you. Thank you, Rod. Sylvia, you have your hand up.
And a reminder for everyone that's speaking at the mic, it's an ice cream cone, all right? Keep it to your mouth so it's loud enough for the people online to hear.
So it sounds like we want to commit to something for the children. We were having a party and nobody was coming beforehand, before the pandemic, which somebody mentioned. We may have to totally change our idea that maybe having children's Sabbath school at 9:30 when their parents aren't bringing them here won't do it. Maybe we need to go with the children's church type thing, at least to begin with. And when we don't have 4 leaders who are every Sabbath, in the middle Sabbath school, some of them might be able to commit to helping once a month with children's church. And children's church can be done with 2 or 3 or 4 or 12, and it'll take everybody but the beginners. We'll have to work on that. But maybe that's going to be something that we can commit to, because we need to commit to the children who are here, need Sabbath school type. They need their level biblical learning. And whereas all of us adults may rather sit here, if we commit to believing that the children have needs, maybe do away with 9:30 Sabbath school and let's make children's church really rock. And then someday maybe we have to do something else, but it feels doable.
Yeah, good point.
Jackie has her.
All right, we do have a comment online from Mary Andrade. She says, I would like to point out television or streaming is better than nothing. My illness with breathing can prevent me from coming, but I'd still do things I can from home, quilting, calling people, sharing the 3 angels message. So,
Amen.
I was just thinking about what Kim had said. This pandemic has certainly been something that the devil has come up with. It has kept us from being together, being afraid of each other, and as we've seen on TV, attacking each other, physically attacking each other. It's been horrible, and not being able to see each other, and that's what I have missed, being able to come here and seeing my friends. And at my advanced age, I have to admit that I had forgotten a few people's names. It's terrible. It's been awful. And we have to just keep praying that we'll be brought out of this.
Thank you, Jackie. I wanted to, if no one else has, I wanted to post the next two. If you can see up on the screen, A and B. I know that our church attendance has been going up recently and online also. And I think Pastor would be more able to tell us how many of our members maybe are not joining at all, whether it's physically or online. But the next question says, what can we do to increase attending or online? You know, so I know that there was a time when there was very few people here physically. I think when we started, there was like 8 or 10. And I know that has changed. And I know that once people commit to coming or joining online, for those who are not able to join, like not only like Mary, but others who are choosing to stay online, what can we do to increase the commitment that once we're all here, we also need to commit to volunteer for the ministries that our church has. So what can we do to encourage those members to commit to something like a cradle roll teacher, like Sylvia says, or a deacon, or all the ministries that our church has? What can we do to help them commit to something like that?
And real quick, like Sue, she just committed. She said, I'm going to commit to coming to church. But there are people that, how can we encourage that type of commitment? Now, we might not, obviously can't force people to come to church every Sabbath, and that shouldn't be anything we're interested in doing. But how can we encourage people to make these types of commitments or recommitments?
Gris.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I think that when people knows that what is the purpose of the church, what is our mission, it's not just to get here and make community. It's not that. That's not the end or the goal of the church. The goal is the mission. So when we are aware of that, we commit more to in whatever area is needed, so everyone who comes here can be fed, and themselves become missionaries. And that's why we start with the little ones, according to the age, and then growing. So wherever we are, we can share Jesus.
Sue has her hand up.
What about a buddy program? What about if we had a list of the people that used to come and are not coming now, and we have church attendees that are willing to connect personally and individually with those people to encourage them, to spend time with them, to tell them how great the church is or how wonderful the Lord is that's blessed my life. What about something like that?
I hate to tell you how many people have joined this church, and over the years, they just faded away. And I think what Sue's saying really is a key to getting people back to church. people are reluctant to say why they left and they haven't come back. We've seen people in town, we'll talk to them, hey, nice seeing you. Oh yeah, it was nice seeing you too. Well, you used to come to church, can you come back? Oh yeah, we're thinking about it. That's about as far as it goes. So Sue says buddy program, just it's in-house visit maybe with their permission would be a great thing to do.
James and Kim.
The old-fashioned term for the buddy program is discipleship. So, all right.
James first.
Yes, I just wanted to say that, increased commitment, it needs to start like with the members. If we're going to do a virtual, how many people are attending our Sabbath class? We're seeing very low attendance in Sabbath school class. And I know there's a lot of families that have children. If children see their parents attending these classes, and then they're going to get pulled into it too as well. And then, of course, when church begins, then they'll acclimate really quickly. But my question is, why aren't we getting more members attending our Sabbath school classes?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Why aren't we getting? I think Sue wanted to answer that question directly, and then we'll get. Sorry.
I can answer a little bit of that, James, and thank you for sharing. A lot of our members don't have computers in order to watch. Margaret Reyes is one of them. She doesn't have a computer. And we have other people in this church that just, maybe they're living by themselves and they don't know how to talk the computer language to get started. I think that's one of the reasons.
Okay.
Thank you, Sue. Kim?
I know that a friend of mine, her church, and this was pre-pandemic, but when they would someone would come to the church or start going regularly, they would automatically pull them in and ask them where they'd like to volunteer, and actually have an active volunteer program to where they allowed them to try different things. Maybe they'd go into children's section, program one day or 1 week, and then maybe they do greeter another week or shadow a greeter, and just kind of get an idea, and then do a spiritual assessment test too, just to kind of see where their strengths were. But it was an active process of, as soon as you come in, this is the expectation. And when they came in, they got involved in something, and not that they had to stay with that ministry forever, but it got them pulled in, it got them to know people, it got them connected to people. And I feel that would be very beneficial for our church if we could, get people pulled in and doing something. It doesn't matter what, but people, if they don't know anyone or they're not feeling like they have to be here for something, it's real easy to, especially now after the pandemic, new habits have been formed. It's much easier to not come if they don't feel like it, especially if you don't have anything that you're committed to have to do.
Mitch.
Yeah.
Well, I have a few friends that are at different churches, and what they have done since this pandemic has started, they have added a youth pastor to draw kids in from the high schools, from the other schools, and talk to them. And then they have a little get-together or a gathering at the church one night during the week. See, we got a pastor that tries to do everything, but he's only human. We need a youth deacon, somebody that's real good with kids. He's not turning his head, but.
And I just want to say too that not everybody is going to be in all ministries at the same time. And to give you an example, growing with my kids' age and going to youth classes with them or youth events. For instance, I feel very comfortable around like Brent, Prince, Sydney, my daughter, Paul, Georgie, all that age group. I'm very comfortable around them because all the youth classes that were done for them, by Kim, and so we were always there. So that's an age group where me and my wife have always felt very comfortable. So we feel very close to them because we watched them grow up since the school and the youth classes. So we someone could even say that we were probably closer to them than some of our older members in our church, because that's the ministry you were in. And so just like if you, like John and Allison would probably be closer to the people at New Hope, than me, because I don't think I ever went to one of those, but that doesn't mean that everyone has to go to all the youth and all these things. But there's different, like Kim was saying, you're going to find an area where you feel comfortable. And if you really love what you're doing, you're going to do it, and you're going to be a blessing to them. And like in this case with the youth, they were a blessing to us too, so we've grown up with them. So just that's something to remember with people who are not coming, or if they're not joining, we can do things to commit to them. As far as commitment, I think that's, I don't think anybody else has a question on that, if anybody. But once we commit, then there's specific ministries that we have in our church. And my wife was talking about mission. So what type of things can we do to better serve our community? We already have a few ministries that haven't been able to go forward because of the pandemic, but serving the homeless, and I know the ministry with the bathrooms, Sue. So those are things that were already in place that we're going to look forward to see how we can do them and start them up again. So I don't know if anybody has any things about what other things our community has that we can better serve them, and what needs do they have?
When the mayor of Tracy was here, this is one of the things I asked her. I said, what are some of the needs that we have in our community? We're not a big church. We don't have, a lot of financial resources, but, we have the people that we do have, they like to serve, they like to give as much as they can. So what is something that our church can do? Unfortunately, she didn't really have an answer. She said that there are several nonprofits in town that are doing some active things. She said you might want to think of partnering with the Boys and Girls Club. I know Sue Miller has been heavily involved with the Tracy Community Connection Center with the homeless, housing and showering and things like that. And we've been supportive to at least to a degree for the TCCC. But what are some of the needs that you know of, that you see here around town, that you see in our community?
James.
Yes, I'm sure you're all aware of the fact that for the last 5 years, Bess and myself and my family have been involved in the food bank that was started by us across the street. I was traveling to Hayward, picking up truckloads of food. And then eventually the pastor left and Pastor Ruben came on board, and he kind of took over, and he wanted to get the harvest food bank. So that happened. But initially, Bessie wanted to get a similar program for our church so that we can get people that will come into our church to benefit by a food program. I mean, the bread ministry has been going for the last 5 years, and it's going strong. And I was committed, I'm still committed to that. And my suggestion is that we talk to Pastor Ruben. They do the third Wednesday of every month, and they give out food. They have a list of people that come every week on a Wednesday. And they, as a result, they've been getting baptism. So I'm sure Pastor's aware of it, and he's talked to Ruben about that, Pastor Ruben. But if we could develop some kind of a partnership where we do the first Wednesday of the month, they do the third Wednesday, we start giving food out from our church, where we can just set up tables like they do right at the front of the door at the front of the church and hand out bags and have sign-outs and see what we can do to increase the outreach program with the community, and see how we can also give these little bits of information to get people to come into church.
So service, like what James is talking about, is one form of evangelism, of spreading love to the community. When I first started coming to the church, at that time, in the middle, I would say 2000, 2005, almost every Adventist church that you went to, it was a prophecy seminar, you know. And you remember the images and all that. And that was, I think that was awesome, because it was, at that time, I remember the churches that we visited, they were full. You know, so there's a place for all of that, but there's also other forms of evangelism, like service. So my next question is, what other types of evangelism can we use in our community to reach our community? You know, James shared one that is going on right now, but what's another form of evangelism that we can do in our community?
Well, I think one of the things, you know, you say, what are the needs in the community? Well, there's, I don't know, one time I counted it, there's about 50 churches here in Tracy, but there's still a lot of people that don't know Jesus. There's still a lot of people that don't know the Bible. And I think if we could have some programs here like we used to have, bands, or we had Turlock Ensemble one time, or special music, a special program, and advertise it in the community, because there's no cost to it. It would be like, well, maybe not the right word is entertainment, but it would be a reason for people to come out if they like music, you know, if they like to hear a band, if they like to hear a special speaker. We had, what was his name, George?
Jaime.
Yeah, Jaime George. And you know, there wasn't 20 people in the sanctuary at the time that happened, but if we know in advance, we can put an ad in the paper, in the local paper, or dead. At one time, we had some electronic demonstrations in the Better Living Center, and Sylvia's husband actually did a heart seminar, a medical program, and different things like that. Cooking schools are a good one. So I would suggest that.
Oh, I was just trying to.
Yeah.
So thinking about what Sue just said, and what James mentioned, do you think that our church hasn't done anything these past few years? Do you think that our church, I'm asking this question because I'm leading up to the question of why hasn't our church grown much over the past several decades? You know, why is it that our church has become smaller? Why hasn't it grown? Do you think it's because we haven't done things, or do you think there's something else involved? And that's my question to you. Why do you think that our church hasn't grown over the past few decades? And some of you have been here longer than I have, so feel free to share.
And I think that the growth isn't so much we haven't had new members, but as I think Bob has said, there's been a pretty wide open back door, right? We get members and they trickle out, and we get new members. And so we talked about in the 2020 visioning, we've kind of been in the 250, 260, you know, plus or minus, you know, in that ballpark for several decades. Meanwhile, the population of Tracy has, you know, tripled. And continues, you know, they're putting in more developments and more housing. So why do you think it is that we're kind of just in this zone perpetually?
Our actual membership is pretty much right on what it's been for several times. When one of my sons started to come back to church, he said, "The church is just as full as it always was," which was fuller than it is now. He says, "but the people are all different." So although the church stays at about the same membership number, the people within it have been changing, moving away, coming, go, growing up, whatever. The thing that many Adventist churches have about 40% attendance of the people actually on their membership thing. And I think that's what we want to really increase, is the attendance and the engagement. Because I was just looking at the books, because I was doing something else. I'm the church clerk, so I have the membership things. And as I was going through, there's a lot that we don't know where they are, so we're going to do something with those pretty soon. But there were quite a few that we knew where they are. They live in Tracy, they live around close, but they're not attending. And so I think that's an area, you know, for one-on-one type of thing. They're not going to come back to a big evangelistic thing. But just, hey, you know, we haven't seen you. One-on-one is probably the best we've got of any kind, and Vicki is a good example of that.
All right, I think we're going to switch over to the black microphone.
Bob?
I just wanted to make a comment. I hope this kind of tags along with what you're saying, Sylvia. I was treasurer here for 14 years, and I used to get a report that showed the tithe of all the churches in the conference. It's probably still do that. And our church was more generous in that regard than most all of the churches. And then you would look at it and see how many were delinquent from their reporting. And so we have that positive thing about it. Our church was a giving church, and probably still is, I don't know. But anyway, that's a good thing that we were really up there.
Yeah, definitely.
So in thinking about that question that I just asked about why hasn't our church grown, why do you think there is such a lack of young adults in our church?
Okay.
I'm older than Wes. So, essentially, young adults, and especially if they're young parents, them and their kids kind of go hand in hand. And most of them will gravitate towards a church that has programs for their kids. And for the most part, when they find a place where their kids have programs, then that's where they will go. That's what I feel is the challenge that we have. That if we can find a way to have programs for kids, even though we don't have kids, then it will kind of start creating an environment for the young adults. I know we do have like maybe 1 or 2 kids, but they usually take part with the adult programs. So that's one of the challenges. I just came back from Kenya, and the church that I was attending at, they have a very robust program for their kids. My 2 daughters over there are taking part in the Adventurer program that was very elaborate, where they have programs like even on Sundays. So it's something that definitely we're missing.
That's a good point. And that's why we are still passionate about our school, because we know this connection, but yet, yeah, there still are obstacles here.
Kim?
Okay, I will share my thoughts. I don't have any answers, but I've worked with a lot of the youth, right, for the last, 6, 7 years. Now, most of those are young adults, and some of them are a little older young adults. But I have been trying to get them back here. We are going to have, we tried to do a Bible study group on Friday nights. That it worked sometimes, didn't other times. Started to fizzle, and then we tried some other things. So we're going to have, I talked to Eddie Heinrich at the conference, and his thought was, when we emailed, is you just have to do some social things right now. They're not as maybe focused on biblical things, but try to get them back together, because the pandemic has kept many of them away for a long, long time. They've all started new habits. They do things on Sabbath. They go places. Church isn't a priority right now, sadly. And, my daughter's in that group too. So, she's like, Mom, I'll probably go twice a month, but don't expect me there every Sabbath, right? And so that's just kind of, I think, the mindset of all of them, and because it's just been a while since they all had to be committed to something. So we're going to have a Christmas party on December 18th, just a social for young adults. We're going to have some games and food and all that stuff. And I'm going to try to get together with them and say, what interests you guys? What and I don't want to be the babysitter. And like, Tyler and I had talked, they're adults now, right? So I can't babysit. I can't be the mom per se, because they're not going to want to talk to me anymore. But so we're trying to turn it over and say, you guys are all adults, and what do you guys want to see what happens? And if we could get them back here, maybe doing some type of AV once a month, if I could get them to help with Bible adventures when we start children's church again, just things like that to get them back here so that they can get to know everybody again and get connected. And we, as older adults, can mentor them, be their friend. We can't be their moms or dads because they're adults. But we can at least try to mentor them. None of them have children, the ones I'm talking about for the most part. They're all single. And so there isn't any reason why they shouldn't be back here, but they're not. And I think we need to pray about it and do what we can do. And like I said, pray for me when we have this December 18th party for them, that we will get a good turnout socially, and I can kind of sit down and we can have a candid talk and say, hey, what would work for you guys? We miss you. We want you to come to church at least once in a while, and get them reconnected. So,
Janine.
I completely agree with you, Kim. I work in higher education, so my college students, it's very much been difficult for the past 15 years. I think you could see the transition, but the pandemic and the involvement, the intent to engage, the buddy system, all those things are going to definitely help with growth. But with the younger age group, college to maybe 20, 25-year-olds, it's very difficult. But socially, getting them together has been helpful with my students. Just providing that. One will come one time, then it turns to 10. Then, hey, guess what? This is really fun, guys. You're missing out, right? Come get your blessing, like Rod had said. Ultimately, we want everyone back here, but providing those opportunities. And the other thing I was thinking about was having some sort of presence on Sabbath, how we can have that engaged. Pastor, you began the whole presentation with, we are in a hybrid system right now, and that's just their normal, what they know now. Can we have a student from the school do the children's story, and just do it recording, and we'll show it on Sabbath, just to have that involvement. Or one of our young adults do part of a special music, and they record it and send it in. For them, that's their reality right now, to doing their assignments for school. So it's something that we can help them, that will start engagement. But the ultimate is to get them back together here. So if those little just opportunities and spaces, what they know, I'm like, oh, I understand that. That's what I'm doing for school as well. Maybe that starts it. And then we have the social gatherings, and they realize, I do want to be connected. I do want to be back. So.
Mitch.
Well, I've noticed that everything the kids want to do is on their phones. I mean, even when we go out to dinner or anything, they're on their phones, talking to each other across the table with their phones, not even using their mouths. They've lost their social skills. And she's right. If we can get them to do things online, something that they're used to doing, and giving them their own opportunity to kind of work in their own way back into church. That's what we need to do. We need to figure out how to get them to do things and put them on the monitor and let them see that they are being appreciated.
Yeah. Thank you, Mitch.
I have a comment again from Mary online. She said, many past visitors, and she's kind of spoken about this to me, that she's had young people visit this church, and said that after a few Sabbaths that the words that she says that they said were that there's a lot of stiff necks around here. And perhaps that was a few years ago, because I'm not sure that would be the same reaction now, but that is a concern, right? We want to create a welcoming environment, a supportive environment. This is part of what we've been talking about, this afternoon, is the fact that things are changing, right? Things have changed, and we need to be able to adapt. And part of that is, I think in previous generations, the thought was the adults, set the standard, and you live up to the adult standard. And if you don't, you're out of here. And that's not cutting it anymore, for whatever reason. And we might bemoan that fact. We might think, that's the way it should be. But that's not reality in 2021. So we're going to need to figure out a way forward that, now that's not to say adults will have no input, all right? Because that we just can't sit silently, and that's part of as we talked about, the buddy system, the discipleship process, however you want to call it. But it's going to be different. It has to be more of an equal playing field in terms of what their expectations are, and getting them re-engaged, connected.
Yeah. Something came to mind right now as we finish this part of the meeting today is that no matter what happens or what ministries, the church starts to be more active in this year, whether it's a teacher with one student, like Sylvia's saying, it could be just one child in there. As a church, we need to be 100% behind that teacher. We need to be supportive of that teacher, even if it is just one student. So we need to support each other in that way, because sometimes, even though she or he only has one child in there, maybe they don't have help and they need help. And if we just say, well, it's just one, how hard could that be? Well, we need to be behind that person. We need to be 100% behind the deacons, behind the whatever ministry you're doing, behind James and their ministry, and Kim with VBS, because Kim can't do everything for VBS, so she needs a lot of that support. So we need to show that same support with all the other ministries that our church has. So whatever that is coming up forward, we need to back them up and give them our full support, whatever that ministry is. Kim.
Just to add to what you said, Leo, we haven't had any youth hardly ever show up, and I've kind of gotten a little lax, going, well, if I get there at 10, it really doesn't matter because there's nobody going to be there, right? And I brought snacks and all this stuff, and no one showed up, and I hadn't had any for like 2 months, maybe 3 months, and I kind of had that attitude, and I feel bad that I did that, but I was kind of discouraged, and I drive up, and who's getting out of the car but Tim Mustard and his granddaughter, Callie. And now I haven't seen her since she was in beginners, when I taught beginners. Now she's a sophomore in high school. I didn't even recognize her. I recognized her because she was with Tim. And he said, hey, look who wanted to come to Sabbath school today. And I about fell over. And I thought to myself, okay, here you are going, it doesn't really matter. But it did. And, I thought, okay, I've got to make it fun for her because I have no idea when she'll show up again, right? And we had a great time, and we did hangman with Bible people and, and people, places, things, and kind of did a Wheel of Fortune type thing. But it was fun, and she had fun, and we were laughing, and I thought, okay, I missed a blessing. If I wouldn't have, shown up, I would have missed a blessing. And hopefully we planted a seed. And who knows when she'll come again, but you never know when they're going to come, when they're going to show up, and what they may be needing, right? So I just want to say that to encourage everybody not to get discouraged and want to give up.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for your questions and comments. Pastor's going to take over now with the rest of the meeting, but I just want to thank everybody for everything. Thank you.
children that I am helping out Thursday afternoons from 1 to 3:30, the kindergartners, aftercare. I'm amazed at how often they ask me, what is that building over there? I said, your car's parked over there. What building is that? I said, that's our church. Oh, well, what's in there? And I said, you haven't been in there? And they said, no, we don't know what's in there. Why can't I'd have to ask B, take those 4 little kids and walk them over here and to this church? Maybe then they go home and say, gee, Mom, we'd like to, they don't even know it's here, but I don't know if there's something against that because maybe they're not members and their parents don't want to be involved. I don't know. But I'm going to ask B if it would be possible, because they are asking me the questions all the time about what do we do over here.
That's great point. We need to take advantage of children's curiosity, Yeah. Mitch, were you? No? Okay. We have a couple more sections, not too much longer, but before we move on, just to recap, I do want to, I think we've talked, we've perhaps asked some more questions that don't have easy answers, but I think we have some good ideas. A theme that I've kind of heard from different, in different words from different aspects is this concept of discipleship. Whether, the buddy system, whether it's, training, have new members, shadow, different positions, get them connected to a ministry. This is a core concept of how Christianity works, right? It is through discipleship. A lot of times we think, that the baptism is the end-all be-all. Once they're baptized, that's it. They've arrived, and that's, But what happens, in a month or two when they haven't made any connections? Thankfully, I know Vicky has a connection there on Mitch, so I'm not too concerned, but that doesn't mean that we have to shun her and think, well, Mitch is going to take care of it all, right? Vicky is, and she's starting to get engaged with being a greeter and other things, so that's great. But this needs to be intentional. This needs to be intentional. And I know that part comes down to leadership of the church, but the truth of the matter is, you don't need a leader to say, here's a program to disciple, right? We're all called to be disciple makers as Christians. So you don't need to have a position. You don't need to be a pastor. You don't need to be an elder. You don't even need to be on the nominating committee list. If you are a dedicated Christian, you have the freedom to say, hey, there's a new member. Let me invite them over to lunch. Let me invite them over to game night. I'm in the AV booth this week. Let me invite them to see if they want to help me, or whatever the case may be. So we're having these meetings because as leaders, we've been talking about these topics, but we don't want to have it just say, hey, these are what the leaders are going to tell you to do, right? This is, I think Sylvia mentioned at church today, we're a member-led organization. We want you as members, us as members, to come together and talk about these issues, come up with good approaches to them, because we need to work together. It's not a top-down thing where we're telling you this is what you need to do. It's as, hey, we're all in this together, literally. We need to work together to figure out these next steps of moving forward. So I appreciate that discipleship thought that has been expressed.
Alrighty. I was just thinking, and I was kind of thinking about it while everyone was volunteering to talk, and I'm not one to talk that much, but I was thinking about my experience as a child in my home church when I was growing up. And I felt comfortable in adult Sabbath school. That's actually where I went to Sabbath school, is the adult Sabbath school. Because I didn't feel comfortable in the youth Sabbath school so much, but it definitely had its place. The older I got, yes, I went to the youth Sabbath school, but when I was a child, early teen, we had an early teen group, and if it wasn't my father leading out in early teens, because we had 3 people in my church that were early teens, And then I would go to the adult Sabbath school, and I learned a lot. And they invited me, and they were welcoming. But what really shaped my young adult, high school age, I guess it was high school, I'm not sure. I can't remember, it was a long time ago. It was before I got baptized, but our church had something called prayer angels. And it's an idea. It doesn't have to be done exactly the same way, but every child's name was on a piece of paper, and different adults in the congregation just picked up a name and they prayed for them. Starts out with prayer. Fortunately, the person who picked up my name, he went several steps farther than just prayer. And he prayed for me for years. It wasn't just a one time. It was for years until he passed. He found out my interests. He was very, very knowledgeable, very interesting. He traveled a lot, and he found out that I had an unusual but interesting interest in entomology, and I have showcases of insects to prove it. But
Yes, she does.
I have like 20 showcases of insects that I've collected over my lifetime. And when he would travel, he would bring back either pictures or sometimes the actual insect that he had brought from his travels. I'm not sure if they were legal, but yes, he brought them. And one time he did bring me to the Entomology Museum, the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles. And it was a bug fair. And very, very fascinating, very memorable. But what I'm getting to is that he took interest, and it might not have been his full interest, but like he didn't have the same interest, but it evolved. And it could just be that we find out who our young people are, what their interests are, maybe take note of what all their interests are, and maybe those of us who can can pray for them and maybe find similar interests. And
Yeah.
it makes a difference.
And I know that, like Mitch said, it would be nice to have a youth pastor, right? It would be great. But it doesn't look like our budget is going to be able to get there anytime soon. But again, we don't need, while that would be nice, we don't need a youth pastor to disciple our kids, right? That's not a requirement. It's a requirement to have good, active parents, and it's a requirement to have involved church members, with prayer angels or whatever the case may be. To have church members, and we've talked about this. If you remember the Australian pastor we had come and do a presentation, he said learn their names. That's a good starting point. And then get to know them. That's really key. And then you pray for them, get to know their interests. And when they see that adults care about them, it's gonna make an impact, a big impact. All right, there are some comments here on Zoom that I want to point out. Mary Chris says to assign church programs to different individuals, either active or non-active members, to encourage participation. So if we, instead of maybe looking for volunteers, look for some voluntold, right? And get them here because, we want them to be here. We need them to be here. And because we do, right? There are definite things that we have needs that people that aren't attending can help us out with. That's a good point. Rovik says that we can have a dictionary of what gifts we have. And this is a good, like, for example, plumbing, or if you have some electrical training, fixing computers, can give computer tutorials, and then offer those to church members in the community. Or so that we can be a resource to the community. I know other churches have, back when, perhaps at the peak of Facebook, they would have the young adults or even the youth, the teens, have a grandparent Facebook training, right? They would bring the older generations in and teach them how to use Facebook so that they could communicate with their kids or grandkids. Now grandkids aren't on Facebook anymore, so maybe we need to have an Instagram training or a TikTok training or something like that. But that's the same. Using those concepts, because like Mitch said earlier, the younger generations are on their phone constantly. So instead of trying to get them off their phone, which I think we might like them to be off their phone, perhaps we should start by meeting them where they're at, which is on their phone, right? Instead of saying, "Oh, you shouldn't do that," like, okay, let's engage you where you're at, and that's how Christ operated, right? He engages people where they're at. Then Angel said we need to look at the general societal demographic changes. Families are having fewer children. Families having children later in life. So yeah, if you've been looking at the news, many countries are getting towards the below replacement level. They're having fewer babies than people are dying. So their populations are shrinking, some more gradually, some more rapidly. And the United States is headed there pretty soon. I think we're just at replacement level right now. So we're at the lowest birth rate, I think, in I don't know how many decades, but perhaps a century or more. So yeah, these are real factors, that come into play. Plus the larger societal trend of becoming a more secular society. So there is less interest, there is less desire in church-related things. But yeah, I think a lot of the things we've talked about, a lot of the ideas we've had have been great. But we want to take a moment, because we do have a couple more sections. So let's everyone stand up. I know after lunch, after especially Sabbath lunch, it's easy to go off to drift off here. But let's stand up, maybe stretch your hips, raise your hands pretend we're a Pentecostal church, I guess. Give a good stretch. Rolling on the ground might be a little too far, but all right. Take a breath. So I think it's clear that we as a church want new outcomes, right? We see the trends, where the trends are going. We see a lot of the things that we've talked about now, the previous meeting, the meeting in 2019, and we know that the way the arrow is pointing is not great, especially in the long run. It might be okay, we're not in panic mode right now, but if we take a moment to look at the bigger picture, we can see that we're headed for some significant issues if we don't have new outcomes. Is that okay for me to say? I think we're all understanding of this, that as a church we want to see the arrow shift its direction. We want to see some new outcomes, which, to put the simple word, is change, right? We need to change, because if we're just doing the same thing we're always doing, we're going to get the same results. I'm paraphrasing here, but an organizational principle that organizations are fine-tuned to get the results that they are currently getting, because that's what's happening, right? They might have had glory days in the past, but what is happening right now, this is the result that they're going to get, because this is the type of things that they are doing promotes these results that they're getting. Does that make sense? So if we want new outcomes, we're going to have to do new things. we're going to have to adapt, as we've been talking about, to not just pandemic and post-pandemic life. We're going to have to adapt to the larger societal changes that we are seeing, demographic-wise, you name it, the changes that are happening around us. If we want to actually have new outcomes, we're going to have to do new things. Are you following along here? Now, I know that this isn't easy, right? I think the statistic says that 80% of people are highly adverse to change. We don't like change as a society. But I think there's a caveat, is people don't like change unless they see the benefit or the need. Because, getting $1 million deposited to your bank account is going to bring change, right? And that's going to be good change. You're like, okay, I can deal with that change, right? You're not averse to change when it's an extra $1 million in your bank account. So it's not a blanket statement that people don't like change. But change, if you don't see the benefit or if you don't see the need, it becomes extra difficult. And so I think through this process, we are seeing the need that our church has for change. And we've mentioned some ideas. We've talked about some possible solutions. And I know as leaders, the elder group, the elder team, the church board, we've talked about some other things, and we're going to continue to talk about changes, and we're going to continue to have these type of discussions as well. But why change is so important, or actually I should say why change is so scary, is because it requires sacrifice. It requires sacrifice. Because we like how things are going by and large. That's why people don't like change, because we don't want to try something new. We don't want to give up something that we've become accustomed to. It requires sacrifice to change. Do you see the truth of this? Yeah. And so for this last section, I'm going to talk about sacrifice for a moment. Leo, would you mind taking the microphone around? It's up here with Crystal. 2 questions we want to spend some time with. The first is, what are we willing to change to get more commitment, growth, etc., the things that we've been talking about? We can't keep doing the same thing. The tendency in the book the elders and I have been reading, the tendency is to say, okay, we want something different, so we're going to do the same things we've been doing, only do them more, right? We're going to, instead of spending $500 for flowers, we're going to spend $1,000 for flowers, right? Instead of, that's the kind of thing that people usually think of when it comes to change. But what are we willing to change, to really change, in order to get more commitment, growth, etc.? Mitch?
Yeah, I want to know, like the commitment thing. Like I'm not saying it's bad, but the same people show up all the time. We don't get other people to commit to give a little bit of their time.
Right.
And that's how do we get them to want to?
Right.
That's the sacrifice.
Yeah. That's there's that principle. The Pareto principle says, 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people, right? And it's usually the same 20% that does the work. So unfortunately, I think we're looking at a time where we're going to have to start not doing things, right? Because the children's program, for example, the beginners, if we don't have a teacher, we can't have it. And so maybe by the lack of having the program, someone's going to say, hey, we need to do it, so I'm going to do it. I'm willing to take that on. So those of us that do 80% of the work, maybe we can take a step back. I don't know. I'm not encouraging that, but maybe that's what it might take, is for things to stop getting done and people to say, hey, well, I guess Mitch isn't going to keep doing everything all the time, so I'm going to have to start helping him out. Or I know, Wes he's taken on 15 extra jobs this month. I'm going to have to help him out. So maybe that's what it might take. But yeah, that is the question. Kimberly.
So 20 years ago, our church didn't have a beginners, a grade roll. Nobody would teach it. That's 20 years ago, which seems unfathomable, but it was true. And so two 80-year-old women said, we're going to step up to the plate. And neither one of them really was equipped to do it. I mean, just because of their age and everything, but they did it. And it then caused Noelle and I, who then I had Sydney and she had Lucas like a year later. We're like, we can do this. So then we stepped up to the plate because they couldn't do it anymore. But it took two 80-year-old women to get the ball rolling again. And then from there, different people took it on. So I think what you said was correct. Sometimes we may not be able to have a program till someone steps up. And hopefully they'll feel the calling to do so.
Right. And that's very true. That there comes a point where those that have been doing it for so long simply can't do it anymore. Whether they move away, like we see with the Lanzas, whether they start getting health challenges, like we see with the Yvonne Miller or Kathy Igarashi, or whether they just simply burn out. Right? The pandemic has caused a lot of burnout across all fields, all walks of life. And so that's a real thing that we have to consider, that there's going to come a time where the people that have been shouldering all of the burdens, or 80% of the burdens, just won't be able to do it anymore. And that is, again, goes back to the discipleship principle. We need to be discipling, and this is what we talked about with the young adults or the younger generations, getting them trained, getting them equipped, getting them plugged in and locked in so that they can start contributing. They can feel like they're a valuable part of the church team. They can lessen the load as well. Wes?
So I have this comment. I think Sylvia said we have about the same number of members. Remind me the amount, Sylvia, 260? Okay, so there's 262 members. I haven't talked to but like 30 of them in the last year. So if I needed any help, instead of calling to 20, 30 people that I see all the time that are already busy, I could call one of them if I actually was connected to them in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And because I have not, kind of like your story about the young people who showed up and nobody showed any interest, didn't get to know them, they just disappear. And I suspect that's what happened to the rest of those people, because if I need help, I just call one of my friends.
Mm-hmm.
I don't go down the church list and said, I'll just call this random person.
Right.
Likelihood that they're going to help me is pretty low. So if I'm not willing to spend any time to cultivate them as far as an interest,
Mm-hmm.
how are you doing? What's going on?
Right.
Not asking for anything, just checking in. I'm not sure how long that would take if all the 20, 30 people that were here said, I'm just going to pick 5 and call one a day talk to them for 5 minutes. So, and say, just checking in, wanted to see how you were.
Right. Yeah.
So, anyway, I thought that
Yeah.
if you don't build a pool of people that you know,
Right.
you don't have a pool of people to ask for help.
Yeah. And I think, on the nominating committee side of things, that's something we have to be intentional about, because we'll do the first pass and then we sit back and say, well, are there people in the church that we haven't asked to do anything, mainly because those aren't the names that immediately pop to mind because we haven't invested in those connections, like you said, Wes. And this kind of comes back to what Crystal said. If every kid has a prayer angel or an adult that they've been connected to since childhood, those are names that are going to be, easily in the forefront of your mind that you can, think about for different positions. And if you multiply that, like Wes said, 5 people, you're going to have the webs are going to start connecting, right? It's not just going to be a single string of spider silk. It's going to be an entire web connecting all of us together. That's a very good point, Wes. And also that comes back to what Rovik said too, of if we had a list or a directory of people's skills and expertises and interests, you could say, okay, well, I've always called Mitch for this, but for car help, but I didn't know Joyce was also a car mechanic too. Let me call Joyce up and see, that way if we have that knowledge, we can start incorporating. Any other thoughts of this first question? What are we willing to change? All right. The second one, and I think this is still connected to that first one. What are we willing to give up? What are we willing to sacrifice to get more young people? Are we willing to sacrifice money? Are we willing to start actually putting some real funds into youth, young adult ministry? Because the youth gets funded, or previously was funded through, I know they would do a gift basket auction, right? We fund a secretary, we fund a janitor, we fund, a yards person. These are all important things, but we weren't putting any direct funds into our youth program. Seven a month. Right, half a pizza a month, right? So what are we willing to do? What are we willing to sacrifice? And perhaps it's not even money. Perhaps it's preferences. Yeah. Are we willing to sacrifice time? Right. Again, preferences. I think a lot of the conflict that generations get into is over preferences. And I'm not here saying that we need to put up a drum kit and have laser lights and a fog machine or anything like that. The organ sounded fantastic today, right? With that said, I don't think we need to get rid of the organ, but are young adults like, oh, where's the best organ in town? Like, let me check Twitter. Where are all those organ heads going to listen to the that's not happening, right? So even though we might love the organ, and probably when it's well played, the youth and young adults aren't gonna riot because we play an organ song from even regularly. But if that's all we do and we don't take their preferences into account, I think we're seeing the result of that over the past several generations. So this is not a rhetorical question. What are things that we are willing to sacrifice to get some new results? Sylvia?
Okay, teens, because we're talking teens are like high school, and we're talking young adults as college and beyond. I don't think any of those people really like to get up early in the morning. Are we willing to have church at 1 o'clock? If that's when they can get up and they can get here. I don't think they're not coming because of that, but I think it might fit into their schedule better. When we're talking about what are we willing to give up, well, my preference is such and such. I'd be happy to come at 1 o'clock too. Now that I've been hanging out, we can still get up late on Sabbath, and have church at the same time. But when we talk about giving up something, that's the type of thing we kind of need to think of, is they'd probably prefer to come later.
On Sabbaths, God doesn't have any extra special blessings for between 11 and 12 o'clock, It's a Sabbath day, right? So there's nothing. Well, yeah, right? It's an entire day. Now, we definitely have our customs and our preferences for, we're used to coming to church at 11 o'clock, having that be the hour. But, that's not the 11th commandment. Thou shalt worship me at 11 a.m. on Sabbath mornings, right? But, okay, that's something we can consider. What are some other things that we're willing to sacrifice? How much time? What do you mean? Can you?
So are we going to sacrifice 5 minutes a day to start? or 10. And of course, it had to be per day. You could just cut it up per week, or what's my total quota for the month. And so you have to pick a number to start with, and then say, who's here going to commit to that? And then what are they going to do at that time?
Right.
And so the best use, if you're only going to do 5 minutes a day, is just call somebody and talk to them and say, all right, I touch bases. That's not the be-all and end-all, but if you don't get the rock to roll down the hill at all, then you're still in the discussion stage. So
Yeah.
if you said, hold up your hand, number of fingers, how much time in a day, you could just multiply that by 7 and say that for the week, that's what I need.
Right.
I don't know,
Right.
because I'm not sure how much I can give. But if I hear a number and I go, well, that might be doable, what can I rearrange to get to there?
Okay.
Doing 6 hours a day. But I've noticed that a lot of the parents wouldn't even let their kids come now, right at this point in time, because of all the there's different things going on. So we got to plan for the future and see how we can make this work. See, a lot of parents aren't coming, but their kids would like to come. Maybe we could pick the kids up and bring them.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be a good idea. See,
Right.
if it's all right with the parents, I wouldn't have no problem picking up some
Yeah.
kids and bringing them to,
Yeah.
because we have a lot of little ones out there that would like to come. The parents aren't coming now.
Yeah. If they're asking what is that building,
Yeah.
there's some interest. Hey, well, let's come check it out. We'll pick you up on Sabbath morning and we can go find out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that might bring the parents in if the
Okay.
kids are talking, oh, I liked it, I want to go again.
All right. Yeah. Good point. James and then Jackie.
I don't know if you guys remember, but you remember when the Samoan church was being built in Sacramento? We had the Samoans people come and sing here a couple times. Well, we actually attended the Samoan church a couple of Sabbaths, maybe 3 or 4. What we really loved is when we went to church in the morning, they had a breakfast, and then we attended the church for services, but then they had lunch afterwards, and they had a youth program. A youth had a program about 3 o'clock, and they actually just ran the whole program. And it started out slow, but then all of a sudden other youth seen the youth up there, and they wanted to participate, and they got involved, either with singing or skits or reading their favorite, whatever. But we stayed there until we closed Sabbath there.
Yeah.
We stayed at church the whole day.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you're gonna, sacrifice, some of the time on Sabbath too. Yeah. Jackie.
This has to do with the younger people. Years ago, some of the members here and the school children, we had interaction with each other where we would write little notes to each other, back and forth, and it was a lot of fun. And at the end, we can't do it now, but we met and we had a luncheon together. But my secret partner was Jared Porras. And in the end, he made me and I still have it on my refrigerator, he made me a refrigerator magnet that has a umbrella with the rain coming down and a little person holding the umbrella. And it says, it said showers of prayers. And I have that on my refrigerator still. But we had interaction with the children, back and forth. So it was really neat, having notes back and forth to each other.
Right.
So we connected with them in that way.
Yeah.
And, and of course, the parents get involved too. So
Yeah.
it was something that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. All right. Any other thoughts? Anyone else online? We have a comment here from the On family. It says, I think too much is focused on teens and younger. What do people think when they think young? Only under 25? I know that we've already gone over it, but 25 to 45 is truly missing, right? That's, I briefly mentioned, if we're just focusing on the kids, where's the parents, right? And we hope to get the parents in, but if we're missing the parents' generation, like that has a domino effect, right? And we have some parents, of younger kids, and even they're not so young anymore, right? Think of the Bowman girls. Sky's a freshman in academy now. And the Ons, their girls are growing up. I think perhaps one of the real young attending children we have is Adia, and we got, on a regular basis, Adia seems to be the only one, at least now. Maybe when things get a bit more up and running, there might be a few more. But the parents' generation aren't here. And so that's a good point, Mike, that we need to, it's all connected, right? And we need to have something for the kids so that parents will bring their kids, but we also need to have something for the parents so the parents will come and not just drop off their kids. And we need to be creating these relationships, these bonds, these connections. So, yeah. All right, any other thoughts, closing thoughts here? Sue. Hold on, here comes the mic.
Most of us have a list of church members at home. So those that you look at your list and you see names of people who have not come to church, send them a Christmas card and say, "We miss you." Sometimes people need the personal touch. They need to be needed. They need to be wanted.
Right. Right. A personal connection, really, personal invitation really does it's not 100% effective, but it's often effective of getting people to come back. Yeah. And this is a perfect time, perfect season. You have an excuse, a reason to do it, right? Okay. Any other thoughts? Mitch? Okay. Yeah, Nona has a list that she can.
Everybody on that list, handwritten cards to everybody on that list a little while ago. One had a picture of the church on the front, and the other had "We miss you," and sent it to everybody. And I only got 2 back that were different addresses that I didn't have. So they got them, but how do we know? If they're showing up, I don't know. But at least it was a contact, and I think that's important. I think maybe phone calls would work too.
Yeah.
But I don't know, huh? Yeah, but anyway, at least we're trying. I just can't, but I've got the list of names, Mitch, if you want them.
Yeah. We do have a comment here from Angel. She said, I'm going to do a little bit of paraphrasing here, that we should be willing to sacrifice how we view what a close relationship with God looks like because of our experience. We tend to think our experience is normative, that how we interact with God, our thoughts of God, our expectations of God, that sets the bar, and if you don't live up to that, or if you are different than that, then I don't want to really connect with you, or maybe you shouldn't even be here at this church, right? But she says, we need to make room for people that are at different places on their spiritual journeys, that maybe connect with God or relate to God in a different way than we do. So I think that's an interesting thought, that in terms of what we're willing to sacrifice, to have a bigger understanding, more of an open mind in terms of not being so perhaps judgmental in terms of how others relate to God versus how we do. And she says, and to be more flexible in meeting the needs of others more. Yeah. Leo.
Yeah, I want to share something that we experienced a few years ago at one of the Lodi Academy football tournaments. When they had the football tournament at Rio Lindo, they had a service on Sabbath, and they don't do the games until sundown on Sabbath, but on Sabbath, they had a special service for all the schools that were there for that football tournament. And one of the grandparents from one of the students then said that he was he was in the where they have church at Rio Lindo, and he said he had to walk out because of the music, the way they were worshiping inside. But one thing that he said was, he said, I grew up different. So for me, I couldn't worship in that atmosphere. He said, I left. I had to walk out. He said, but it doesn't mean that they were not worshiping. It just means that I didn't grow up like that. You know, and so I think that sometimes we take what he said first and we leave it there. You know, and we say, that's not how I grew up, so that's bad. No, he said they were worshiping. It's just not, for me, it wasn't the way I grew up, and I walked out. And I think that speaks a little bit to what Angel's saying, that we can't assume that our young kids are going to like this, think that worship is the same way that we think it is. You know, and so that was something that really touched when he started to share that. It made sense. You know, he wasn't used to that, but it didn't mean that they were not worshiping with the songs that they were playing there.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Griselda?
Now that you mentioned that, I just came to my mind that if we know our youth here in church, you will surprise how conservative they are. Many of them are very conservative, even in the music. So, but the thing sometimes we don't take the time to know them, to love them, and to pray for them, because as adults, sometimes we don't think, just like we grew up different, they are growing different. And what I see, and with my own kids, the challenges the young adult and the youth, the teens are facing are even bigger or difficult than the ones we have when we grew up, because there's a lot of things outside, very accessible, and they have to stay strong. But I always think that prayer is very important.
Yeah.
All the time, for not only our own kids or family, but for everyone that we know.
Yeah. And that's also important to remember for any age group. We tend to think that, it's a monolith, that all youth, all teens like this, or all teens want that, or all young adults, want to do this. But, just like we have differences of preference, so do young adults, so do teens, so do kids. So that's important to keep in mind too. Thank you, Griselda. All right, I appreciate all your feedback. I know Crystal has taken some good notes, and we will continue with this process of moving forward. I do want to talk about at the end here the school, because we've talked about the church moving forward, and the school needs to move forward as well. Just an update here. The school they're humming along over there. I know Beatrice is working hard, as is Wes. They're teaching the kids. But every year we have to take a vote for the school. Last year at a meeting similar to this, we voted to cover a $30,000 budget shortfall for this current school year, last school year, the 2020-2021 school year. But the good news was that it wasn't needed. We didn't have to take that much money out of savings. I don't think we ended up taking anything out of savings, actually. So even though we had voted that, God blessed us in a variety of ways, and we didn't need to actually follow through with that. We did vote last year to have 2 teachers for this year, and that is what we've had. We've had Beatrice and Wes over there, and so we're going to need to take a similar vote for that. Just a quick update on the school's finances. It continues to be a little challenging. We would like to have more students, but things aren't looking really drastically bad. In the numbers that I have seen, it looks like we'll be able to get to the end of the school year in relatively good shape, but things, can change. We'll see. But for now, there's no need to panic financially, at least from the budget report that I have seen. Some good news is that we are at 23 enrolled students, which I think is our highest enrollment in 5 years. So that arrow is going in the right direction for sure. If you're able to go on campus, I know Nona goes there, John Cloak gets over there. There's Bob Miller helps out. I know they're working on the Christmas thing, a Christmas program. But there's good. What a difference 4 or 5 students makes in terms of the energy that happens. And there's a good energy happening there at the school, and there's an excellent team. Beatrice is the long-term teacher, but this is her first year as principal, and I know she's learning as she goes, but she's doing a great job. Wes is our upper grade teacher, and he's come out of retirement to help us, and we really appreciate. I know the kids appreciate the school and the parents. We really appreciate having Wes over there. John Cloak, who has been the school board chair, has taken a step back, and Angel Bowman has stepped up to be the school board chair. They're actually doing a co-chair kind of deal at the moment, but I believe the plan is perhaps for John to fully step back and Angel to take more responsibility. But for now, they're co-chairs, and things are going really well there at the school board side of things. So with that in mind, we do need to take a vote on how many teachers that we want to employ for next school year. I know it seems a little early, we haven't even finished this calendar year, but because Wes kind of agreed, this is not a long-term, it's not a long-term contract that Wes is on. The conference wants to get that position posted as early as possible so that we can get as many candidates as possible. So that's why we need to vote now if we want to fund 2 teachers for next year, or if we want to fund 1 teacher, or if we want to fund 20 teachers. If you vote to fund 20 teachers, feel free to write a very, very large check to the school because it's going to be on you. But so with that in mind, is there a motion for a certain number of teachers? All right, there's a motion for 2 teachers. Was there a second? Any further discussion? Questions, comments, thoughts? 2 teachers seem to be working pretty well. All right, if there's no other thoughts or questions or comments, let's vote. All in favor of having 2 teachers for the 22-23 school year? Raise your hand. All right, any opposed? All right, looks a fairly unanimous vote. Thank you very much and even the people watching on Zoom said hand up, vote yes. So, looking good. So in conclusion, we're wrapping up here, but I think we've had a lot of good discussion. One of the reasons why we're having these meetings is to help solidify our vision as a church. I hope that's come through clearly. We want to have a good, solid vision for where we're moving forward as a church, not just from the elders or the leadership, but as a church that we are united in terms of the challenges we're facing, in terms of the ideas we have, how to face those challenges, in terms of the direction we want to go as a church family. And so we're trying to make sure everyone is united and solidified in that matter. And it's extra important because, it's a little hard for me to say. But Crystal and I have accepted a call to the Hayward Church. It wasn't easy. It was a very difficult decision. And it's not, we've been here 7.5 years. We have built a lot of connections, made a lot of relationships. We love this church. And we love all of you. But despite that, we were asked by the conference to interview at the Hayward Church, and we thought all along that we were going to say no. Like I said, we love this church. But in fact, while we discussed, we talked about it with friends, with family, and the intention was to decline the invitation to serve there. But when the conference needed a final decision, as Chris and I talked, we really felt that as we considered, pretty much looked at every angle, that it seemed like God was leading us to that church. And it's not because we feel that that church is better by any means, that it's a greener pasture. That's not at all the case. But we do feel that this is where God is leading. The transition period is going to be in the middle of January, so we have about a month left to do some more good things together. And we're looking forward to having a good month here at Tracy, but this is going to be a moving forward for us, for Crystal and myself. Again, I wish there was just one giant church, that there was no such thing as pastoral movements, that it was just like one giant conga line, but that's not how things work. I am confident that God is moving in this process and that he is going to be bringing an excellent pastor here to Tracy when the time comes. And this is, again, why I think these meetings are so important, because we are solidifying our vision as a church so that when another pastor comes, they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They don't have to say, okay, well, I'm going to do this, and we're going to go over here. But as a church, as an elder team, as a church board, we're saying we've already done this hard work. We've already gone through this process. We've done the hard lifting, and this is the direction that we're going. So come on and help us get there. And I believe that Tracy can do this. I know God has blessed all of you with great skills, great talents, great work ethics for him. And look at it, you're here awake at a 3:15 on a Saturday afternoon, Sabbath afternoon. So if that's possible, things are looking good. But yes, I look forward to these few weeks we have left. Look forward to more conversations look forward to more spiritual blessings. And if you want to talk with me or to Crystal privately at some point, ask us more questions. We're willing to do that. But know that we love you. We love this church. And we are sad to leave. A part of our heart will always be here. And we'll always take a part of you with us. But we have a month. So with that said, let's close with prayer. And thank you again for joining us here in person, online. And onward and upward. Bob.
What's the appeal procedure? We're going to appeal this.
What's the appeal procedure? That's a good question. I've wondered that a lot, too. I was like, maybe I can appeal the decision. It's because it hasn't been an easy decision. Call the conference out. I don't know, but yeah, Leo.
I just want to say something that a lot of times, as Christians, we always talk about sharing our blessings, and sometimes we talked about sacrifice and how sometimes it's hardest to share that which is most precious to you. You know, if you're someone who's very attached to your money, you're going to have a hard time sharing that money with people, you know, possessions or whatever. And when Pastor first told me, I thought, you know, something that'll help me along with this is I'm going to look at it like we're sharing our blessing with Hayward. You know, I'm not going to look at it like he's leaving us. I'm going to look at it that God has blessed us with Pastor Tyler for all these years. And this is a time where we get to share him with Hayward, and hoping that he will be the same blessing that he was here for us, for their church. And so we just, it's hard, but we know people have to make decisions, and this is a decision that they were faced with, and they made it. And we just want, as they go away in these last few months that we have with them, that our hearts are with you, Pastor, this next month and a half. And even when you go to Hayward, we'll still remember you. You know, and it's just something I wanted to say.
Thank you, Leo. Thank you. With that, let's pray. Heavenly Father, we have had a long discussion. We have had a lot of thoughts, a lot of questions. But Lord, I know you are calling us to move forward in a variety of ways. Lord, as you said 2,000 years ago, the harvest is ready, but the workers are few. Lord, we want to be a part of that harvest. And this is why we've been meeting. This is why we're open to the leading of the Holy Spirit. And so as we have had this meeting, and as we continue to think about these things, as we continue to have ideas, as we continue to implement different plans and different changes, Lord, we ask for your Spirit to attend to this church, to this family, that we might be able to continue to make a difference and make a bigger, better difference in this community, in this city of Tracy for you. Lord, bless us now as we continue on with our Sabbath hours. Continue to guide us, bless us, and watch over us this week. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us online as well.